Hello, and welcome to the Fashion Show. This is a 5-episode series brought to you by the MacArthur Foundation to explore how the fashion industry can thrive, not just survive in the future, by moving towards a circular economy for fashion. My name is Matteo Magnani. I'm a research analyst here in the fashion team of the foundation, and I'd like to say that today is actually mainly going to be about you watching from home. Whatever platform you're watching this on, whether it's YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook, there's going to be a comment section. Feel free to put your thoughts, comments, and questions in there so that we will aim at answering them across the next 30 minutes. I'm actually very happy because today I'm not alone in the studio. I'm joined by my friend and colleague Laura, who is Learning Engagement Manager here at the Foundation. Hi, Laura. I was willing to know what are we going to be talking today about?
Well, thank you, Matteo. And actually, last week we were here in the studio discussing what are some of the new business models that are disrupting the fashion industry. But today we really want to talk about the materials. So in a circular economy for fashion, what are some of the materials that we will be wearing? What will our clothes be made of? And these are some of the things we want to explore here today. And to help us, we will have 3 very special guests that we will introduce very soon. But Matteo, we wouldn't be here talking about this if we weren't trying to solve a problem. So before we talk to our speakers, I would like to ask you, what are the problems with the materials we use today in our clothes?
Yeah, we've been actually looking at that within the fashion team. The problem with the fashion industry is that today it's based on a take, make, waste formula. So we take materials out of the earth, and usually we do that, for example, if we think about cotton, with practices that are very harmful and are destroying the environment. We then make products out of them. Maybe these products are beautiful, but we see that loads of substances are discharged into the environment while we do that. And the products that we make are actually then not even used for a long time. Actually, 73% of them ends up either being burned or buried. This is the equivalent of 1 truck full of garments being actually wasted every single second. So that's the problem we're trying to solve today, Laura.
And so what I'm hearing is, well, that we don't first make our clothes or our fashion products we don't make them in order so that they can last for a very long time. We don't have the systems in place so that they can be used again and again, and also the processes or the materials that we use might not be safe for our environment. So it's really great to have here with us today 3 people who are working in material innovation companies and trying to address this. We have Ricardo Garay from Circular Systems, we have Patrick Lundstrom, the CEO of Renewcell, and we have Caroline Lieder, the head of product management textiles at Lenzing. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. Patrick, if it's okay, we would like to start with you. And as we were talking about what we wanted to discuss here today, you mentioned how important this decade will be for the fashion industry, and you actually said it will be the decade of change. Could you tell us a bit more about what you mean by the decade of change?
Well, the decade of change is, we in order to get to a sustainable world, we need to ensure that we are changing our material streams and that the whole society becomes sustainable, not only energy and so forth, but also food, of course. But then moreover, we also need to make sure that the products become circular. We can have energy we're getting somewhere there. We're moving in the right direction. Food, we're starting to have better production of foods. But when it comes to production of products, we still don't have that circular mindset. And with the circular mindset, in my view, it is that we actually use what we once have produced. So that you take waste and you put it back in and you make new fibers and new textiles out of it. And with that, we have not only that the number of people that we have on the planet today is going to that we need to use our clothes longer. We also need to put them into secondhand and use them again, but we also need to recycle them. But that is even more important because we're going to be approximately going from 3.7 billion people to 5.4 billion people in this decade. So we cannot just keep on pumping up oil or taking out cotton or other fibers out of the earth and then use it one time through the value chain and then burn it and discard it. So, from a more holistic point of view, we need to go to circularity, and especially in the fashion industry, I think.
Yeah, I loved, Patrick, the point you made about all these increasing population that actually needs to enjoy fashion and satisfy their needs of actually wearing something. And we believe that this can really be done by moving towards this circular economy, which we envision in 3 ambitions. Clothing should be used more, should be made to be made again, and made from safe and recycled or renewable inputs. So I'm very curious to know, at Renewcell, what are you doing? What products are you making that contributes towards this vision?
What we do is we take cotton-rich clothes, like cotton, for example. We take your old jeans, my old jeans, shirts, etc. We take that into our process and we make a new dissolving pulp out of it. And that dissolving pulp is made out of 100% recycled clothes. And then we're selling that to the viscose fiber producer or lyocell fiber producers, and then can make new clothes out of it. So we create a closed loop, but we can take it back into our process and recycle it over and over again. So it is a closed loop system that we're building. Although we're very small, and to your point, these additional people coming into to society or to middle class, growing from poverty coming into middle class. It's a fantastic number, 1.7 billion people. That's one India plus one United States. They also want to clothe themselves like you and me. And we have an obligation, I think, to also society that they should be able to have several pair of jeans and several pair of t-shirts the same way as we do. And sometimes we talk about expression and how we talk about, and how we communicate as mankind. We need to communicate. We communicate with words, we communicate with body language, but we also communicate with the way we dress. If you're a man, if you're a woman, if you're at the golf course, on the sailboat, even what your favorite band is, we communicate a lot. So our vision is also that we need to, if we're going to do this change in this decade, we also need to create systems and ways for people to be able to continue expressing themselves. Otherwise, we're going to have some die-hard 1% that is actually adopting to a new type of communication style. But our vision is that everybody should be able to continue communicating with the way they dress, but in a sustainable way. So that's what we are aspiring to at Renewcell, creating that circularity in textile and fashion industry.
That's actually very aligned with the narrative we've been using across the whole fashion show, isn't it? Fashion should thrive, not just survive. Now it's challenged by the COVID pandemic. We believe that it can still, despite all these challenges, thrive in the future by transitioning towards this model. I wanted to just show the audience the fact that you were very kind sending us a dress made out of your material that you just mentioned. We've got this circulose dress, which is actually from H&M. Thanks, Patrick, for sending us this over, so we can really show what it means to recycle old materials into new ones. The label says this is made out of old jeans. Is it truly like that? And where do you actually get these jeans from, Patrick?
We buy them from sorters, so companies like Bank & Vogue, for example. So we buy them in bales, and we take them into our process and we shred them, and then we make kind of a fluff out of it, and then we separate the fibers and bleach the fibers. So it is an industry already to buy garments and clothes out there. It's existing already. However, I think it could become a lot more effective, and that we should collect garments in a higher extent than we do today. And EU is already moving in that direction, but it's not going to take force until 2025. But we buy it actually, and we take it into our process to recycle it.
And Patrick, you mentioned that you are quite small, but you've told us a lot about your plans for the future. Could you share this with the audience a little bit? Like, what are your plans to scale in the next 5 years?
Sure. During let's say 2019, we were working a lot on our strategy, and we ended up what we call own force strategy. And for 2020, we've been working on the engineering. And right now we are raising the money to build our next plant. So the next plant will be built in 2021 and starting up 2022. It will be a 60,000 ton plant. And it will be operational from 2022 onwards. And we already have offtake agreements on, let's say, 2/3 of that capacity. And of course, that is the short-term goal. The midterm goal is to, by 2026, we will have 250,000 metric tons installed, and by 2030, more than 360,000 metric tons installed. So, but the funny thing is that although we are expanding fast and trying to invest as much as we can into this, the industry will grow with those 1.7 billion extra people coming into the industry with 50 million tons. Just in this decade, we're going to go from 110 million tons of fiber to 160 million tons by 2030. That's 50 million tons more. And we are just going to build 360,000 tons. So it's a very, very small number on that growth. And then, of course, you have the underlying volume as well. So we need more companies like ourselves to be able to make an impact into the fashion industry.
Absolutely. Picking up on that we need more companies. I guess this project doesn't really involve just you, but rather it's a collaboration. So I was wondering who else is in this collaboration, if you can share that, perhaps.
Sure. In collaboration with brands, I can only announce the ones that we have launched with. So we have also launched with Levi's, and in the Levi's sub-brand, Well Threaded. It's Levi's themselves. They claim that this is their most sustainable jeans ever. And we have also we have announced that Bestseller is coming out with a collection this spring. And we have approximately another 100 brands knocking on the door. We're too small to take care of everyone, but we're trying to support as many brands as possible. So there's a huge interest, and that's of course why we're investing so heavily into this next plant.
Thank you, Patrick. I would like now to move a little bit to talk to Ricardo. Ricardo, you say in your bio that your work involves bridging the gap between textiles or fibers and agricultural systems. What does this mean?
Yeah, and thank you for that question. I would say essentially most of the work that I do is I guess early on, I identified that there was a huge disconnect between consumers, the people that are growing the textiles or the original raw fibers, the farmers, and also the end consumers and the brands. So there's this huge disconnect, and there's this lack of communication. And so trying to form better avenues of communication is definitely important, because then we can start to really collaborate and identify synergies. One of the things that I get really excited about is the synergy between textiles and food. We're running out of arable land, so any way that we can maximize the total land use and create materials that are going to have nutritional value, as well as be able to be used to clothe ourselves, is going to be one way of making sure that we're not doing things like deforestation and encroachment on other ecosystems. So we have to be really mindful of our resources. So that's one big aspect of the AgriLoop that we focus on at Circular Systems. Yeah, that's one of the things that excites me most.
Well, you just mentioned AgriLoop, which is the main thing that we want you to tell us more about today. What is this product? What is the process to make it, and what is it?
Yeah, I like to think of the AgriLoop as two different things. There's the AgriLoop biorefinery, and then there's the AgriLoop biofiber. And the two of them really represent an opportunity to convert agricultural waste, which unfortunately we've designed a system that creates a lot of agricultural waste. But fortunately, that means that we're also able to scale using that agricultural waste. So we convert the raw biomass into a textile grade biofiber. And so that's it in its simplest terms, but we do that through what we call a closed loop biorefinery. And we're starting with our 1.0 facility, and we're constantly adding different elements to that to increase the closed loop aspects of the system that we've designed. But it's essentially what's unique about the AgriLoop is that we've designed a system that's in harmony with agricultural production. So while we're refining the fiber, and we do that through a series of mechanical and cooking, so degumming steps where we're essentially using temperature and pressure and our biochemicals to refine the fiber, we end up with a cottonized biofiber on the other side for all sorts of different textile applications. But throughout that process, we end up with this wastewater, which is actually nutrient rich. So we're able to extract those nutrients from the wastewater, and the co-product of our system is actually what we call a soil amendment or fertilizer, which we can then reapply to our soils. So what we've tried to do, and our ambition, is to create a co-product that is actually going to help heal our soils, draw down carbon in the long term, and be able to combat climate change, all the while trying to bring better nutrition to the global communities that we're working with. And so it's no easy, no small feat. So fortunately, we've identified a lot of partners to support us in that, and we're taking it step by step. There's a long road ahead, but we're really proud of the things that we've been able to accomplish thus far.
So Ricardo, basically, what I am understanding about AgriLoop is that you are taking low-value agricultural waste that would otherwise probably be burned or end up with no use, and you're turning that into a fiber. And not only that, you are also creating co-products or using the byproducts that are created during this process to also support food production. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. So typically, once the food crop is harvested, so we work mainly with things like oilseed hemp, oilseed flax are where we're starting. That's kind of our ground base. We've also done a lot of trials with things like banana fiber, pineapple fiber, sugar cane, cotton stalks, all sorts of different wheat straws and rice straws as well. There's a lot of opportunity globally, both in the tropics and in temperate climates. And what we've noticed is that, unfortunately, because there aren't markets defined, it's simply easier for the farmers to either set their fields ablaze, so they just set it on fire, and you can imagine all that climate liability, but also human health liability. And in the tropical regions, because these materials are so moisture rich, when they're thrown into a big pile, it goes anaerobic, so it starts producing all of this methane. So you can imagine the climate impact from that. So instead, what we're trying to do is work within each region to identify the natural resources and also the cultural resources within that area, and create a system that is modular by design, that really helps to elevate that waste into a whole different use case and many different types of value-added products. We're starting with textile grade fiber because we know fashion has such a huge impact. And it's a really great way to get different global communities excited about this idea of regeneration coupled with circular technologies. Thank you,
Ricardo. And I think one of the main things from our conversation before this session that kind of stayed with me was the idea of carbon insetting. I was not very familiar with this concept because we hear a lot about carbon offsetting. It's been on the news and everywhere for a long time. What is the difference between these two?
Yeah, I would say I'm no expert, but what we try to do within our supply chains is where carbon offsetting, you would identify how much carbon you're producing within your business practices, and you try to purchase carbon credits that essentially invest in different regional projects like planting trees and so on to offset your negative impacts. Whereas carbon insetting is trying to create supply chains that actually, by virtue of you working in those supply chains, you're actively offsetting your carbon impacts. So one way to do that is through investing in resilient supply chains that focus on regenerative agriculture. That can be a whole number of different things in the food industry. We can look at regenerative grazing. Within cooperation between food and textile production, it can be things like agroforestry, agroecology concepts. So looking at growing coffee and rubber and cacao all within the same kind of biodiverse system. And so by looking at agricultural opportunities around the globe and investing into those supply chains, we're actually going to be able to draw down carbon longer. We're going to rebuild our soils. We're going to see this harmony between better, more nutritious food and also better fibers. So we're going to eliminate waste and we're going to be able to make our supply chains more resilient in a time where climate is changing. So that's what we're attempting to do by working regionally and by working in this distributed way. We really envision a world where our AgriLoop facilities we call them mini mills, and they're really supposed to only service within a 150 kilometer radius. So really utilizing those materials. And so by doing that, we're going to be reducing our carbon impacts from a logistical standpoint, but we're also going to be able to redistribute the nutrients from our system back into the soils. So we're trying to embed those positive impacts directly into the supply chains that we're working in.
This is great to hear, Ricardo, especially given the pressure we're putting on natural resources, how much you can get food, fiber out of the same product at the same time by storing carbon in the soil. That's what the circular economy is about. I've got actually a question to ask you from the audience. Michelle is asking, how can we scale this up? Right now, there is no product yet on the market made with AgriLoop, right? I was wondering what your plans are for the future.
Yeah, we don't have any products currently on the market, but they're about to be released in 2021, which we're so excited about. Fortunately, we have a lot of really strong brand partners that understand that regenerative impacts take some time, and it's going to take a lot of partners to get there. Our intention to scale is really this distributed manufacturing concept. So because we know that we're in a race against climate, and because we also want to look at the redistribution of wealth as one of our main targets, we plan to partner regionally, form joint ventures with different communities around the globe. Oftentimes these will be the farmers themselves, oftentimes the most marginalized communities that we work with. So we want them to be able to retain that ownership and be able to make decisions on how the AgriLoop is going to function in that area. So what we intend to do is to license the technology globally. We're designing it modular from the outset so that we can process a wide variety of different types of agricultural waste, many of the ones I mentioned before, and there's opportunities with others, as well as once we start looking at packaging and energy and animal feed as well, we really intend to valorize the full plant material the same way that nature does as well. So it's a form of biomimicry in that sense. And so that's our intention for scaling, is to make sure that we're redistributing wealth, we're using the regional resources wisely, and we're creating the products for those communities that make sense in that given context in that time period. So it's a bit of an ambitious plan, but that's why we need really strong partnerships.
Of course, we need ambition and partnerships to scale this up. Thanks, Ricardo. We just explored with you and Patrick how with recycled and renewable materials that can even turn regenerative, we can actually take materials in a way that does not impact on the earth. But then we also need to make sure in a circular economy that such materials are processed in a way that is safe. We've got Caroline from Lansing as well, whose company has been doing this for quite a long time already. So, Caroline, hi. Can I ask you what is your company contributing to when we speak about safe materials and safe production?
Thank you very much for the question. So I would say when we talk about safe materials and safe production, you really need to look at how are you processing the materials and what kind of chemicals you use. So for us at Lansing, for quite a long time, we already produce a fiber which is called tensile lyocell, and the real environmental benefits of using the lyocell technology is that you can use the chemicals and the solvents to produce the fiber in a closed loop system. So the chemicals for dissolving the wood pulp, they are reused, and we've got the rate of 99.7.8% of reuse of our solvent. So this really makes it a closed loop system, which is part of our circular economy. And it also helps to decrease effects of hazardous chemicals as well as of emissions to the air, but also to water.
Thanks for this, Carolina. Just because you say that lyocell could be the future, could potentially replace conventional cotton in terms of applications, I was just willing to make a bit clearer what lyocell is and how that is obtained, because that perhaps is sometimes not super clear. You've used the metaphor of the sugar in the tea. Could you please use, maybe that's helpful to explain it better.
Yes, so basically lyocell is a so-called wood-based fiber, a cellulosic fiber. What we do is we use pulp, so wood pulp, and we dissolve it in a chemical, and then we spin a fiber out of it. And you can think of it as not a chemical process, but rather a physical process. And the analogy is a little bit like, think about when you dissolve, so you put sugar into your hot tea, and then it's dissolved, so it tastes sweet. But if you would take off the water through steam, and then you would create back the sugar within your bowl. So it really, there's no change in the structure, there's no change within the chemical properties of the pulp. And this really makes it easy also in the reuse. And as mentioned, as it's not a chemical process, you also don't get any changes or byproducts or waste materials out of the process.
Thanks for that, Carolina. That really helped, figure how this process works. You've said also water consumption is much more beneficial than for cotton, right?
Yes, exactly. So this is a very important topic, I think, for the overall fashion industry as well. How much water do we use, especially in water scarce areas where a lot of textile production and cotton production is taking place. So when we look at lyocell production, based on the forest that we use, but also other raw materials we use for our lyocell processing, we need about 20 times less water than conventional cotton. And on the one hand, this is based on the fact that the forests or other raw materials we use for the production, they don't need irrigation, but also within our process, we reuse the water. And this really means that we save a lot of resources for our planet.
And we know that Lansing is a big organization, and we know how much you're working to make sure that the materials that you use are used in a safe way for our environment. But we know that you are also working hard on how to make sure that they can be recyclable. How do you do this at Lansing?
Yes. So on the one hand, we at Lenzing, we also look as the Ellen MacArthur Foundation at two ways of the circular economy. On the one hand, the biological circle, and on the other hand, the technological circle. When we look at our fibers themselves, so they come from botanic origin, from a renewable raw material, and they can also go back to nature, so they're biodegradable and also compostable, which is really for the natural cycle. But we don't believe that's where we can stop. I think it's also what Patrick said before. We really need to make sure that everything we produce can then also be reused or recycled. So on the one hand, we also have a product with recycled content in our program as Lyocell. So it's called TensorWave Refibra technology. There we use recycled cotton as part of the raw material to create a Lyocell fiber. But in addition to that, Lenzing is also very strong on the research and development side. So our colleagues in the R&D department, they work on these recycling concepts, on the one hand for cotton and cotton-rich materials and textiles that can go back into our production. But on the other hand, they also work on seeing how our own materials, our own Lyocell fibers, can be used to make Lyocell fibers again, so to really close the loop on our own processes and our own products. So we look there more on the patent side, as well as research and development, and cooperate also with different partners in the value chain to create products and projects within this recyclability.
And Caroline, we have a question from the audience that is and Patrick as well, if you want to jump in as well to add something to this, and it's around customers and the users of our clothes. And I think there are two things I would like to ask you. One is, well, how do we ensure that our customers or users know that the materials that are used in the clothes they buy or rent come from these kind of processes that we have discussed in this session? And the second question from Katya on YouTube is like, how can we, and it's very related, how do we educate them so that they know? So I think it's in general a question around how can our consumers, our customers and users be aware of all these efforts that are put into these processes.
Yeah, okay, sorry,
Caroline, you start.
Thank you. I believe at Lenzing, what we've done, especially within the last years, is that we focused very strongly on how can we communicate also to consumers. We have branding programs where you can find our Tensor branding on the garments, on the products, and that lead you also to our website for more information. With this branding, the consumers can be sure that our fibers are included within the textiles, and this really gives more security. And in addition, we talk also a lot about our processes and our products already on social media to educate consumers. And we are also very proud to work with brands and retailers, what we call like co-branding. So there we not only put our logo on their products, but we really train and educate their staff so that even in the shops, people and on the floor, they know about the processes, they know about the benefits of the fibers, and can really talk and educate then the consumers again. I think that's only part of it. So, but I think it's very important to start these conversations with consumers, as well as with these branding possibilities to give them the opportunity to really see what's in their product.
Well, I think we have a very good opportunity here to talk to consumers and so forth, because if you look at it, we want to eat sustainably, right? We want to travel sustainably. We want to have sustainable buildings, and and all sorts. And of course, we also want to clothe ourselves sustainably. If you look at Generation X, Generation Z, and so forth, they're not asking for it. They are demanding that we have circular materials, that we have circular ways of doing things. And so I think the branding here is, as Caroline is talking about, it's important, and that we need to support that what consumers actually do get is a circular green product. What I worry about is greenwashing. If you look at it, if I may be a little bit hard, if you look at the politicians, for example, they have been talking about sustainability for the last 20 years and done very little about it. We don't even have collection of garments and clothes in Europe just yet, or elsewhere in the world. So there's a lot of talk and greenwashing from all different kind of directions. And I think here we need to, as an industry, both with the fashion brands, they are really looking for ways and technologies that are sustainable. The problem is they don't exist today. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to create that circularity that we're talking about. The other thing is to also support the brands and also consumers that they really get what they pay for. That they actually get a material that is sustainable, and that is with tracers. We need to ensure that there is materials that all the way through the value chain, it has a positive or at least very minimal impact on the environment. So there's a lot of things that we need to do in order to do that. However, I think that the movement from consumers today is extremely strong. What can actually, dampen that and kill it is greenwashing, and that I think we as an industry need to be very careful with, because if we start seeing things that are greenwashed, then consumers will lose faith in the sustainable materials, and then we're going to have a problem long term. And we have seen in some instances that happening in the food industry, that people don't trust the big food companies. And I think here in the fashion industry, that would be great if we could avoid that.
I totally agree with that, Patrick. In fact, the way we try to do our job here is by trying to align forces of the industry behind this common vision to make sure that we are all working towards the same direction, and as well as consumers, we're all able to spot where efforts are really being made and where those are not really real. I'd like to ask one last question. I would love to stay here much longer, but we're running short of time. This would be for Ricardo from Dedre, from YouTube. He's mentioning that consumerism is a big part of the problem, and that is putting increasing pressure on resources. How do we make sure that these new resources that we get are protected and nothing happens to them as it's been in the past?
That's a great question. I would say that there's a couple ways of looking at that question. Of course, we have to be incredibly mindful of resources, and we have to think about how we mindfully apply those resources to products. So aligning a product to a certain garment or to a certain product category and ensuring the longevity of that so that consumers can really fall in love with that garment and extend the use case. That's one important way. What we're also excited about in this new idea of the circular economy and interacting with the regenerative economy and supporting that ecosystem is that by investing in certain resources, we're actually rebuilding our ecosystems. So we're trying to get past this idea of finite resources and start thinking about how we can have restorative global economies that actually rebuild our ecosystems. So I get really excited about those opportunities, because if we can actually create products that are biodegradable and actually can become soil again, and can actually look at these soil fertility cycles and ensure that we're creating products that that exist in harmony with that. I think that that's one way that we can protect our finite resources and start thinking about abundance.
Thanks, Ricardo. That was a really great answer. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us, Patrick, Caroline, and Ricardo. We're running out of time, so we need to just wrap up. It's been great to learn how, by moving towards a circular economy based on safe, renewable, recycled, and even recyclable materials, we can really address the challenges we have, for example, waste, pollution, and climate change. I think we're done for today, Laura, aren't we?
Yes, thank you, Matteo. And I would like to thank the audience at home who has been sending us all your questions. Please keep coming, please keep posting them on our channels. And if you want to keep the conversation going, you're also more than welcome to join our LinkedIn community. And if you want to find out more about the work that we do at Make Fashion Circular at the Foundation, please check our webpage under activities on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation website. Next week, at the same time, same place, we have our last episode of this series of 5 episodes around fashion. We are going to be talking about what circular design is and means for the fashion industry. Don't forget to subscribe to our channels if you want to be notified when we go live, and we look forward to seeing you next week.